The Pittsburgh Pirates had a game to forget on Tuesday, but after today's game, they enter the biggest stretch of their season.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. My name is Ethan Smith. You can follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. I am, of course, a lifelong Pittsburgh Pirates fan, bringing you analysis, bringing you my opinions, bringing you my thoughts, bringing you everything about the Pittsburgh Pirates every Monday through Friday here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. And full transparency, I turned the game off in about the seventh inning of the game last night. It was one of those games last night where the Pittsburgh Pirates, that's one you just kind of toss in the trash. You remember back in the day when you had the old Microsoft computers and you put the document in the trash can on the computer. Yeah, that's what you do with that kind of game. It was a game where I really thought that due to splits, because the Pirates do have some pretty advanced splits this year against left-handed pitching, which they've seen quite a bit. We all remember the beginning of the year. I really thought that they were going to get after a guy like Patrick Sandoval, who came in with a above 5 ERA. The offense just didn't really find its groove. Sandoval, something Joe Block even mentioned on the broadcast, was able to find his groove pretty quickly, and the Pirates were just never really able to get him out of it. And I think that that was a big reason in the loss last night. Obviously, the offense didn't play all that great. Quinn Priester, who's been up and down again to start this year, up and down last year. You still want to look at Quinn Priester as a guy that you hope can work out. Obviously, still 23 years old, still plenty of time to develop, still would be a massive addition to this rotation if he can become more consistent, especially when you're factoring in that a guy like Policygenius is going to be coming down the pipe eventually. And this is a rotation right now that is still one of, if not one of the best in the National League, for good reason. I mean, you look pitching overall, Pirates are still a top 10 team in terms of ERA at a 3.66, just above the Atlanta Braves, who have a 3.67 at 11. But you really look at one of the big things that I want to highlight here. The offense has not been all that great. We know that. The offense has struggled a ton. Thank you all, by the way, for tuning into this live edition of Locked On Pirates. And OPS is one of those numbers that I look at quite a bit in terms of team success and individual success. It's one of those statistics that you can really hone in on and look at and see, okay, this guy is not only getting on base, but he's also hitting the ball hard. Or this team is hitting the ball hard and finding a way to get on base. The Pirates OPS right now, folks, is a 634, which ranks only above the Miami Marlins and the Chicago White Sox. So not good. They're a few points behind the St. Louis Cardinals, a few points behind the Cincinnati Reds. So some NL Central teams down there in the bottom pits of the NL Central, or of the OPS number. And it's interesting to think about because the Pirates, of course, we know, got off to that hot start. They got off to the 9-2 start. They looked unbeatable. Then the offense has tailed down considerably. We've seen a lot of issues with this offense. We've seen pretty much everybody go cold at once. Everybody kind of heat up at once. We got a sliver of that on Sunday against the Colorado Rockies. Got a little bit of it on Monday from the Mitch Keller full complete game. And then, of course, Edward Oliveira is hitting that grand slam. Outside of that, though, there's still the issues that we've seen. They're not taking advantage of the runners in scoring position like they were to begin the year. They're not taking advantage of plus hitter counts. I mean, we see them all the time get into these 2-1 counts or 3-1 counts, and it just seems that time and time and time again, they're just not finding ways to figure it out. And you look at OPS as a number. Now, obviously, that's on base plus slugging. You consider the average number too. They're 26th in that number, 221. They're 26th in baseball and batting average. But this is still a team that, like, when you look at the other teams that they're surrounded by in these statistics, like the St. Louis Cardinals, like the Chicago White Sox, like the Cincinnati Reds, it's interesting because this Pirates team is still third place in this division right now behind the Milwaukee Brewers and the Chicago Cubs, who we'll get to later in this show. But they're kind of in a weird spot because they've had this terrible stretch, but they're not at all out of it whatsoever. It's still very early in the year. I mean, it's May 8th, and they still have plenty of time to figure this all out. But they do have a big stretch coming up against the Chicago Cubs starting Friday. I'll be in attendance of that game, so if you want to come see me, just come say hi. Then you play the Brewers, and then you play the Cubs again. It sounds very familiar to something that we saw last year. But before we get there, today, they do face off against the Angels in a rubber match, a game that you would very much like the Pittsburgh Pirates to win, a game where they will face a righty for the second time in this series, or actually just the first time in this series, because they faced Tyler Anderson on Monday, and then, of course, Patrick Sandoval yesterday. And Soriano comes into this game with a 3.77 ERA. He hasn't played all that bad, albeit he's 1-4, but the Angels are also 13-23, so they're not exactly the epitome of good baseball right now. Now, yesterday, 9 runs on 15 hits. You hope, and your hope, if you're a Pirates fan and the Pirates themselves, is that was just kind of a blow up from that offense that also hasn't been all that great either. And that Martin Perez, who comes in with a 3.15 ERA today, does what he's done all year and just shoves. And that's what you really, really hope for. Now, this game does start in about 13 minutes at the time of recording. We are live. Wanted this to be kind of a pregame kind of thing for everybody that's tuned in here. Thank you all again who are tuned in. And it's very interesting to me when you look at this game, and one of the big issues that the Pirates have continuously had in the Derek Shelton era is that they just can't find consistency in terms of just having a consistent lineup. Well, the lineup today, it's an interesting one. I'll say it's an interesting one. It is a right-handed pitcher, so they do have Kutch leading off. Kutch in the leadoff spot has seen its success. It's seen its downfalls. Kutch obviously not having the year that a lot of us would like him to have. Then you get Brian Reynolds, O'Neill Cruz, Connor Joe, Rowdy Tellez back in the lineup, Jarrett Triolo, Jack Sawinski, Joey Bart, and Alika Williams. So I do find it interesting that they are giving Alika a couple days in a row here. And that's not because O'Neill Cruz needs rest. They're giving Alika Williams a little bit of room to work here because he hasn't been all that bad. He's batting .256 at the bottom of the order. He's a guy that's, like, lately hasn't been at the peak that he was to begin the year, but he's still a guy that has been able to hand things off to the top of the order and be a guy that can be on base when those guys come up to the plate. And against righties, you guys heard me mention the splits earlier, considerably worse against right-handed pitching than they have been against left-handed pitching this year. A big attribution to that is Brian Reynolds has been much better against left-handed pitching this year than he has against righties. So we'll see what the Pirates can do here. And again, it's an offense from the Los Angeles Angels that isn't all that great. Yeah, you have Taylor Ward. Cole Tucker has gotten off to quite the start in LA. Kevin Pillar had a great game yesterday. Logan O'Hoppe, one of my favorite younger players in baseball as a catcher. Then you have Calhoun, Joe Adell, Zach Neto. There's a lot of guys there that do have the potential to do stuff, but it's still an offense that I do think that Martin Perez should have success against because he's had success just really throughout the entire season and has been one of the better offseason acquisitions that the Pirates have made. And if you want to go into this next stretch, which if you're seeing the title of this live stream, you're seeing the title of this show, it's the Pirates' biggest stretch of the season so far. Bar none. Easy. It is easily their biggest stretch. Because now you have a 13-23 Angels team in your ballpark at 12:35 local time, meaning this is 9:35 start in LA. this is a game you want to win because then you come off of not one, but 2 series victories, which would be great, going into a stretch against the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers. A stretch that we are very familiar with as Pirates fans from last year. We all remember last year in the middle of the season when this team was still in contention. It was a team that was still contending. They were still in the middle of the mix for the division. And then they lost 10 games in a row to Chicago and Milwaukee. How can they right a wrong this year in 2023? And how important is this stretch for how the overall season will turn out? We're going to talk about that here on the Locked On Pirates podcast, this live edition of the Locked On Pirates podcast. But before we do, folks, let's hear from eBay Motors. Folks, there are millions of parts for your MVP, and you can win every time with parts that fit your ride over at eBay Motors, because passion, drive, and patience are the formula for winning championships and what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every single time, or your money back every single time it doesn't work out. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. And with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available, folks, to U.S. customers. And folks, welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates, every single day. There are some of you here at this live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in. I always appreciate when you all tune into this show, as you always do every Monday through Friday. Don't forget to subscribe and like on YouTube, and of course, turn on the notification bell on all of your audio platforms so you know when the Locked On Pirates podcast is coming your way. Rod, I am not doing the game. I don't want to get flagged for that. I'm just doing a little bit of a pregame here for today's episode, talking about, we talked about game 3 already of this series. And now let's rewind the clock a little bit. Let's rewind to last season when the Pittsburgh Pirates were going into June. Henry Davis and Andy Rodriguez were on the precipice of being called up. They were guys that we all expected to be called up to bring this offense some firepower, to bring this team some firepower after the 21-8 start. And then came the Chicago Cubs and the Milwaukee Brewers. A stretch of 10 games against the NL Central, which at the time, it was a very winnable division. It was a division that the Pirates were fully involved in, even despite their terrible play in May. It was a division that really throughout the year was a winnable division. And it sounds very similar again to this season, because now you enter this stretch against the Chicago Cubs starting on Friday. You then go on the road to play Milwaukee, who you've already split with this year. And then, of course, you play the Cubs again at Wrigley Field. Now, what's interesting about this stretch this go around is when you look at the NL Central right now, Milwaukee and Chicago have kind of been playing hot potato with who's leading the division over the past couple weeks. Milwaukee at 21-14, Cubs at 22-15. Then, as I mentioned earlier, you have that big bundle of teams of the other three. The Pirates at 17-20, the Reds at 16-19, the Cardinals at 15-21. Even the Cardinals at 15-21 are 6.5 games back of this division lead right now. So unless you're looking at the NL East and you're the Miami Marlins, or you look at the NL West and you're the Colorado Rockies, or the or the AL Central and you're the Chicago White Sox, then you're looking around and you're saying, okay, yeah, we got through the first month of the year. Things are still going okay. And the division's still up for grabs. Now, the Pirates were thinking this exact same way last year, and it didn't work out. They go into this stretch, and as I mentioned, a win today would do numbers for this Pittsburgh Pirates team, because you would go into the series winning 3 of your last 4, I believe 4 of your last 5, coming off of 2 series victories against teams that you should be beating in the Colorado Rockies and the Los Angeles Angels. And not only that, you've already split with the Milwaukee Brewers this year, a team that has, Gary Sanchez, Jackson Chourio, Freddie Peralta. But their pitching is interesting. And that's what I want to hit at going into this stretch. Is for the Pittsburgh Pirates right now, the big overarching positive has been the starting pitching staff, something we didn't expect it to be this year. Mitch Keller has looked a lot better as of late outside of those first couple starts that he had to begin the year. Martin Perez, the aforementioned Martin Perez, who will be on the mound shortly, has done very good this year. Jared Jones, as a rookie, has broken multiple rookie records and done phenomenal things. Then you look at even a Quinn Priester, who's given you a couple of good starts. He didn't have a good one last night, but he's given you a couple of good starts here and there. Even Bailey Falter, who also did not have the greatest outing in his last start, has given you some quality starts here and there. For Chicago and Milwaukee, yeah, Chicago has Shoto Imanaga, but the Pirates arguably have the best starting pitching staff in the division right now. You couldn't say that last year. You just couldn't. Yeah, I know you had Jose Quintana. Yeah, I know that you had Mitch Keller becoming an all-star. But there were definitely better pitching staffs in the division last year. You look at Corbin Burns in Milwaukee with Freddie Peralta and Brandon Woodruff. Then you look at the Cincinnati Reds, who have budding guys like Hunter Green and Nick Lodolo and Williamson and now they add Frankie Montas, but they're having pitching issues. So now that you're changing the idea here for the Pirates, you go into these series and you're thinking, okay, 10 games, you're going to get a full round of this rotation twice in arguably the biggest games of the year so far. Now, it may seem like a stretch to say that this is their biggest stretch of the season so far. But again, folks, and I mean, I have it right here, you don't have a stretch like this again from what I look at it for the rest of the year. You just don't. The only time you really even come close to it is in August when you have the Reds and the Cubs in a 7-game homestand. And then you have the Cardinals in Cincinnati in a 7-game road stand. You don't have a stretch like this where you play divisional opponents for basically a week and a half for the rest of the season. So take advantage of it when you can. And this is a Pirates team, albeit with the offensive ineptitude, with everything that they deal with offensively, they can go into this and win these games. They can go into this stretch this year, unlike last season, and pitch their way to wins. They can go into this stretch and hope that O'Neal Cruz, who's heated up as of late, can win them a couple games. Because, folks, remember, even last year, they didn't have O'Neal Cruz. They didn't have a guy like Jared Triolo. They didn't have another pitcher like Jared Jones. They didn't have T. Brian Hayes hitting the baseball like he was. That's interesting to think about, because now you're adding pieces to the puzzle that the Pirates didn't have last year. Having O'Neal Cruz back in this stretch is going to be massive. It is going to be a massive thing for them. Because, yes, O'Neal Cruz could be playing better baseball overall, but he's played a lot better as of late. You're even seeing a guy like Edward Olivares start to get a little bit hot now. Ryan Reynolds is having the occasional good games that you expect from him. And you're getting contributions everywhere. That is not something that they were getting last year going into this stretch of 10 games against the Brewers and the Cubs. Now, full transparency, I'm not here to tell you that the Pirates are going to go into this stretch and win 7 out of 10. Not here to tell you that they're going to go into this stretch and lose 7 out of 10. But what I am telling you is that they have a chance to right a wrong from 2023 because the pieces that are there are offered to them for free. O'Neal Cruz will be a part of the ride this time when they play the Cubs this weekend and when they travel to Milwaukee and Chicago next week. He was not there last year. You did not, again, have the bat that Ke'Bryan Hayes possesses right now in that series. If I actually remember, I think Ke'Bryan Hayes was hurt in that stretch of time. Now you're starting to theorize, okay, how much of a difference do these guys make? And we'll see. We'll talk more about the upcoming stretch and some other things. If you guys want to drop some questions during the ad break, you are more than welcome to do it because I will answer them here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. But before we get to our final segment of today's May 8th edition of Locked On Pirates, folks, I want to talk to you about Prize Picks. Today's episode of Locked On Pirates is brought to you by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use code Locked On MLB for a first deposit match up to $100 because, Prize Picks is the #1 daily fantasy sports app in all of America. All you have to do, folks, is just pick 2 more or less on player props that are not designed against you. They are designed just to play the numbers. You can bet on everything from strikeouts to RBIs to first inning runs and more. And you can do so with your favorite Pirates players like Ryan Reynolds, Ke'Bryan Hayes, O'Neal Cruz. And if you want to get crazy, Alika Williams is even available as a prop every now and then. The more players you add in your picks, the more money that you win. And you even have the security, folks, of having a lesser payout if you don't get all the picks right and you only miss one, but you could still win some money. So make sure you go download the Prize Picks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. All you have to do is pick more, pick less. It's that easy at Prize Picks. And folks, welcome to the third and final segment of today's episode of Locked On Pirates here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every single day. The game will be getting underway here shortly against the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim, where the Pirates, of course, will be looking to win their second consecutive series against a team below 500 and look to move to 18-20 on the year. And again, going into your biggest stretch of the season, beginning it at home, obviously a homestand. You're in the middle of it right now. You're hoping that the Pirates, of course, exit this homestand with a winning record. They currently right now are 3-2 in the homestand. Sorry, I had to do some math there. And if you win today, you move to 4-2 on the homestand going into that Cubs series, a very crucial Chicago Cubs series. And looking ahead to that a little bit, we'll obviously look ahead to it later in the week. There are no scheduled pitchers for that series just yet on either side. One of them will not be Paul Skeens. Derek Shelton did say that Paul Skeens, of course, would be having a start in Indianapolis this week or this weekend. And for the Pirates, again, I just really think that a lot of what we want to see from this team and a lot of what we're expecting from this team is the offense to finally catch up a little bit to the pitching that we've seen. I mean, you guys heard me earlier mention some of the teams that are on the wrong side of the baseball gods in terms of OPS and average and slugging and all that stuff. Those teams are in the gutter. The Pirates, meanwhile, have expectations. They have the idea that they can compete in an NL Central that really didn't get out of their hands even in this long stretch or elongated stretch of losing a lot and losing the teams that you really shouldn't have been losing to and having offensive issues. They're still well in this. And that's why this stretch coming up is so huge and could impact the entire season. Because say the Pirates go into that stretch and in a perfect world win all 10 games, then yeah, you're going to be very happy. We don't live in a perfect world and baseball isn't a perfect game. Say they go 5-4. Make some inroads, right? You go 5-4 over that stretch. You don't fall off the face of the planet like you did last year, but you maintain pace. I think that would be a win. And and I'm sure a lot of you probably feel the same way, is that if they can have a winning record against the Cubs and the Brewers in this 10-game stretch, it's kind of hard for me to really think that a lot of people, including the team, wouldn't be happy about that. I mean, again, this is a stretch of games now where you don't have a day off after Thursday until the following Monday after that stretch. So you have a full day to think about going into this stretch and a full day to think about leaving it. And it's interesting because I did want them to call up Skeens on the 10th or the 11th or at some point for him to be available, because he would have been available twice in this stretch. Could you imagine 8 out of those 10 games, you have Mitch Keller, Martin Perez, Jared Jones, and Paul Skeens in 8 of those 10 games, with the other 2 likely being Quinn Priester or Bailey Falter? It's interesting to think about. But even then, 6 out of those 10 games, you're getting Keller, Perez, and Jones. Take advantage in those games. You have to, because those are your best pitchers that you have right now, and your best chances at winning come when they are on the mound. And we're going to, of course, again, talk more about this stretch on tomorrow's show and Friday's show. Again, I will be in attendance at PNC Park on Friday against the Chicago Cubs at 6:40. Pirates, of course, kicking their game off right now against the Los Angeles Angels in the rubber match of their series against the Angels. First time the Angels, of course, have been at PNC Park in 8 years, so we'll see how this goes for the Pirates. Folks, thank you so much for tuning in to the Locked On Pirates podcast here on the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team, your Pittsburgh Pirates every day. My name is Ethan Smith. Follow me on Twitter right there at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates for all of your news, analysis, opinions, and reactions to everything going on in the world of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And please, please enjoy all the content, and I'll see you on the flip side.